Welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. It's time to know more so you can say no more. It's time for the Clearly Christian Podcast. Here's your host, Dr. Cy Smith.
I'm Dr. Cy Smith, and this is Clearly Christian, a podcast about what it means to see the world from God's perspective and the impact this has on training the next generation to live a life consistent with a biblical worldview. If you've been listening and you like the show, I'd encourage you to hit the subscribe button or leave a review. That'll let others know the show's worth listening to, and it'll certainly help us make a difference for the cause of Christian education. So thank you in advance for being here and helping us spread the word. Have you ever thought, why is education so expensive? The cost of college especially seems staggering to most families, and sending your child to a private school isn't considered cheap either. What are they spending their money on, and is it worth it? Today, we're tackling both the cost and the value of education. The culture, the economy, and the workforce are changing, and this has serious implications for educational leaders and the schools training the next generation. Our guest today is Dr. Greg Miller, president of Malone University in Canton, Ohio. He's an emerging leader in Christian higher education, and when he became president in 2023, he was proactive in reaching out to me in his desire to connect Malone University with quality Christian high schools. It became apparent from our first interaction that Dr. Miller understands and places a high value on Christian education at the K-12 level. Let me set this up a little bit. Outside of the 60s and the 70s, private schools have never had this much momentum. Some are calling this, in fact, a second renaissance of Christian education. Well, the picture for these schools has fundamentally changed. For decades, Christian schools, and really private schools in general, operated with a scarcity mindset. That is, how can we do more with less in every area? Less resources, lower salaries, you name it. But other educational options, especially those at the K-12 level, apart from traditional public schools, are booming today, and the mindset has moved from one of scarcity to abundance, or at least surplus, not necessarily scarcity. But there's a price tag that comes with growth, and it will continue to climb as you get bigger. You must be prepared to pay that price, or you will slide the other direction. Both your revenue and your expenses will climb, and I believe that what you do in a season of surplus will determine your long-term success. Leading through a time of surplus might sound easy, but it's not for most leaders and boards, especially at the K-12 level. Why? Because more than ever before, you must learn to think like a business owner. You run a nonprofit school business with a surplus budget. You have to take into account that you're a hybrid organization, an educational institution, a ministry, and a business. This is a major paradigm shift for professional educators like myself. Education really is big business, no matter what size of school you're leading, and probably no one understands this better than those leading at the college level, where the annual budgets are staggering simply to maintain an expected standard for delivery. When you also consider the changing face of the American workforce and the need for colleges to adapt in order to survive, the expenses climb even higher. So why is college so expensive? What do they spend their money on? And how can we as leaders, even at the K-12 level, better manage our schools as educational institutions, ministries, and businesses? Well, our guest today, Dr. Greg Miller, has his work cut out for him in this area, but I know he's not only given great thought to these things, but he's done excellent work in this regard at Malone in very short time. So let's go ahead and dig in. Dr. Miller, welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Cy. It's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Well, Dr. Miller is somewhat new in his role at president at Malone University, but he is very familiar with the operations at the university level. At the time of his presidential appointment in 2023, he had just completed 22 years of service at Malone, serving in the roles of professor of history, social sciences department chair, and provost. He's a two-time recipient of the Malone University Annual Distinguished Faculty Award for Teaching and the recipient of the Ohio Magazine Excellence in Education Award. And a few unique insights, and I know that you don't know, and you may not always see this everywhere, but he was raised on a large ranch in South Dakota, the only person I know like that. He's also an ordained minister, and as a bonus, he was a South Dakota State High School 1,600-meter track champion and former state record holder. And I won't ask you how long ago that was, but that's great bio information.
Well, thanks, Cy. Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So again, yeah, welcome for being here. Well, when you hear me say something like, yeah, education's big business, I can't help but think of your perspective. As I just said, 22 years in the classroom, and I don't know at the college level what they necessarily knew about the business of the university when you were at, that position, serving as obviously department chair and things like that. I don't know how many business meetings you were in, but when you hear it's big business, what are you learning about that in your tenure now as president, and as you have transitioned? Anything surprise you, or definitely some significant learnings as you moved into the world of the business of higher ed?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is my fourth year serving as president here at Malone, and I spent most of my career. So this is my 25th year at Malone. I taught 9 years at a Christian college in Pennsylvania before we transitioned to Malone. So most of my time was actually spent as a classroom professor, and you have a limited perspective. And actually, that's the way that it should be. Positions like mine, I often liken it to a hospital president. And that is, we know that the real work is done with the doctors and nurses and surgeons. But somebody needs to be there to make sure that supplies are in the closet and the electricity stays on and community relations are good. Because you want that surgeon, when they're scrubbing up to go into surgery, you don't want them thinking about those kind of things. You want them laser focused on the patient. And so that's the way that I view this work. And it is an extraordinary learning curve. I will tell you that if you ever want to have an opportunity to fulfill the Apostle Paul's injunction to pray without ceasing, just become a Christian college president. And I mean, it is continuous. The challenges are enormous. But fortunately for me, I had a nice kind of developmental preparation period. So after about, more than 20 years in the classroom between the two schools, where I said I would never go into administration. And in the higher ed space, at least, there is this real sense of faculty and administration, and quite often you don't understand the reasons for the decisions that administrators are making, and you can get frustrated about it. And I had a typical, I think, faculty attitude about that. And when asked whether I would transition into administration, I always said, no, the Lord's called me to teach. I love teaching, love my students. And then the Lord used a conversation a little over 10 years or so ago to open my heart that this kind of work is a real calling. And I wrote in my journal, so as I was moving into the president's office, I kind of was reflecting on this period in my life 10 years or so ago. And I had noticed something. I wrote in my journal: is it appropriate for a Christian to aspire to a college presidency? I wrote that in my journal in 2014, and I eventually came to the answer no. And the reason for that is that anybody that I know that kind of raised their hand and said, pick me, either had no idea what the job entailed, or their ego was really what was driving it, and they should never be let near the office. So what I did come to conclude was that it was appropriate for me to be the best prepared that I could be if the call were to come. And so beginning in 2014, I said yes to administrative tasks that there were opportunity. I said yes to national training with the CCCU in leadership and the Council for Independent Colleges, and gradually took on more and more responsibility. And with that training, became aware of this entirely new dimension of the educational process that involves management of resources, budget lines, budget management, personnel management, all of these kinds of things. As I gradually moved from department chair, general ed director, associate provost with responsibility for athletics, and then finally into the president's office. And I will tell you, Cy, there's still things that I am learning now when I was a VP for academics as provost, thought I understood how things worked. But when you see it on this level, when you have responsibility for everything, it is an entirely different perspective. But I am grateful that the Lord gave me an opportunity for literally kind of 10 years of preparation, or a little less than 10 years of preparation for the role. And I took advantage of that, learning everything I could about business operations in order to get there.
Yeah, excellent. Well, good points, good analogies. I totally get I think all of us can relate to exactly where you started, the doctors and prepping for surgeries and things like that. I know our family personally experienced something like that when the surgery room was not ready for the operation because the HVAC system was not working properly. And so the whole surgery got delayed to 24 hours because the surgeon was afraid that the utensils were not being properly sterilized, and because the HVAC wasn't cooling properly. I mean, it probably cost the hospital thousands of dollars, obviously, and it certainly cost us a major inconvenience. And it was just the business of doing exactly what you said. So I totally get that. Well, I know, like I said, seeing our budget, and it's really small, I'm sure, compared to a university budget, but extracurriculars and the scholarships and of course, the personnel and the compensation, the benefits and things. And I mean, the list goes on and on in terms of what we're spending money on. Technology, of course, the grounds, the property, things like that. What other things have jumped out off the page at you as you've looked at the college level budgets and you said, okay, now that you're starting to understand how things work a little bit more, what are some of, for the average listener out there who says, man, I went on the website and this school's $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. I mean, I just don't understand why the tuition has to be that high. So as you look behind the scenes and, give them some insight into the world of these universities and administrators, what are some big ticket items that, maybe I didn't mention so far that are really going to drive those costs up at the university level for the average consumer?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is that in higher ed, there's a significant difference in private education between the sticker price, as we call it, the published price, and then the actual price that families will pay. And unlike the kind of transition that's happened in the K-12 space, we have not, in Christian higher ed, been the recipient of state funds that can help to support what is happening here at the university in the same way that the K-12 space. And we can talk more about that, but our legislators are very keen on private Christian K-12 education, but our legislators currently are less keen on higher ed in general, and so our Christian private institutions kind of come under that cloud a little bit, and so we have not seen the kind of resources headed our way. So, and it's a competitive market. So the first thing that folks should know is that the actual cost that you pay, what we receive in terms of net tuition revenue, is substantially less than the sticker cost. And that is our single highest expense, is our own internal scholarshiping, which is necessary in a competitive environment to encourage students to attend. And so I'll give you some shocking numbers here, and that is tuition is listed for Malone at almost $40,000 a year. But when you average out what our families pay, and remember, there's considerable difference from one family to the next, depending on need, depending on athletic scholarships or chorale scholarships, etc. But our net tuition revenue lands at between $13,000 and $14,000. So the student who sees the sticker price at nearly $40,000, oftentimes they'll immediately kind of deflect from a Christian institution because they'll say, there's no way in the world that we'll be able to afford that. But once they go through the scholarshiping process, they find out, oh my goodness, this is actually much more affordable than what we had anticipated. And that's an entire system that's kind of in place, and we all participate in it. And there are reasons for that discounting system. But I'd love for us to have true price accounting, but it won't work for the market. And then in addition, we're running basically a small city here. So we have 100 acres on our main campus. We have a 183-acre Christian camp that was donated to Malone. We have, 15 to 20 major buildings on campus, including residence, as well as athletic facilities and all kinds of things. So just this year, our fixed rate for utilities expired, and we had to renegotiate a utility contract for campus. And it turns out that utilities are much higher now than they were when we had negotiated that last contract. And the increase alone of utility costs anticipated for this next year, which we have no control over, is nearly $250,000. And that's just the increase. So, and also I will say for a school like Malone, you say extracurriculars, but athletics plays an outsized role in that. We are an NCAA Division II university in a very competitive conference. So we compete against Ashland and Hillsdale and Cedarville, other schools. And so there's a disproportionate amount of our funding that goes for personnel costs associated with this, travel expenses associated. One of our conference schools is in Kentucky Wesleyan. So we are traveling from central Michigan all the way down to Kentucky. When our men's basketball team had great success winning the conference up at Hillsdale and getting an invitation to the Div 2 big dance, that's charter buses to Missouri to participate in the NCAA men's basketball tournament that started there. So there are significant expenses, and you had mentioned HVAC. I know more now about HVAC than I ever want to know, and it seems always to be bleeding funds somewhere on one of the buildings and one portion of the building somewhere. These are things that people don't necessarily think about when they think, oh, well, it can't be that expensive to pay the salary of a faculty member.
Right.
But they don't realize at a place like Malone, you have more than two support staff for every full-time faculty person that you have. And because it's like running a small city, actually, with infrastructure, personnel, all of those housing, residential, food services, all of those kinds of things.
That's a great analogy. I'm glad you said that because it really is. And it's an obvious, but I definitely did not think about that. Obviously, just the sheer boarding aspect of what it is that you're doing. Obviously, the people on campus and utilities connected with dorm life and things like that. The hot water tanks, right, and the HVACs and the heating and the cooling and things of that nature. So yeah, you're exactly right. So I love that analogy, and that is so true too about the travel costs. So this is why I think we can understand this. Those of us that follow, Division I football teams like Ohio State and say, why am I paying $6 for a 50-cent hot dog at the Horseshoe? Well, probably because I'm paying for the travel cost of the volleyball team to go play USC on a Tuesday night, or the football team to go play Oregon, on a Saturday and then fly back. And so the travel cost. And so really, too, and the scholarships, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up because what you could almost, maybe what the listener could say is, hey, listen, we probably know that we need to put the sticker at 40-something because we want you to know how much it's costing us. However, we're going to budget for that difference between, like you said, 13 and 15 or something like that. That scholarship money that we have that has to be real. So I have to go out and find those dollars somewhere. I can't just give those dollars away and say, oh, I'm just going to discount it. It cost us 40, but we're going to charge 14. I'm going to write off that difference. If you don't have that coming in. It's just phantom revenue, and then that's going to catch up with you. So those dollars have to be made up somewhere. So you're trying to make sure that, yeah, I need to show you what it cost us, but I have to continue to raise this to subsidize the scholarship.
Right. And so that's a really good point, Cy, and very important for us and in Christian higher ed in general, that that we have the financial support of our community beyond those families and the students that are currently attending. And so in my seat, one of the most important roles that I have is actually as fundraiser in chief. I'm storyteller in chief. But a significant portion of my time is actually spent covering that difference by asking people who care about Christian education and care about Christian worldview formation at this critical period of time from 18 to 22. I mean, Barna Group emphasizes that in terms of resilience in faith for an adult in their 30s, what happens between 18 and 22 is critically important. And so I, fortunately at Malone, we have a community in northeastern Ohio and beyond who really loves what we're doing here, loves that we have basically put a stake in the ground for Bible-based, Christ-centered education in our region, and said we're gonna form students in this way. And there are folks with resources that say, listen, I want to help you in achieving that mission. And so something that we have at most colleges and universities do is an annual fund that we annually raise money that is unrestricted that goes to cover that gap. That is in addition to the funding that we will raise for specific projects or for building projects or renovations or things of that nature. So fundraising is a very significant portion of my responsibilities. And again, as faculty member, you're not thinking about that. Right. Like you're thinking about the students, but I need to be able to be out there. And people said, "Are you going to be able to do this? You've never done this before." And I said, absolutely, because I know the story of our students and the impact for Christ's kingdom that Malone has made on their lives. Give me an opportunity to tell somebody what God is doing in the lives of our students. I'm happy to do that and then invite them to join in on this good kingdom work.
Yeah. Great point. Yep. And I completely agree because that's the world I live in now as well. As a high school history teacher and a high school principal for 12 years, I had no idea what the fundraising piece of the superintendency was going to look like. And now I feel like, that's a full-time piece of my position. Well, that's a good segue also into this whole idea that I mentioned in the introduction about Christian schools being a hybrid, being an educational institution, being a ministry, and then also being, and you kind of just spoke to it there, as a business. So when you hear that, how does that play out at Malone? Is that really what you're talking about, is saying, hey, there's a story to tell there, and I've got to make sure that people know the ministry angle, but I also have to make sure that I'm fundraising, and I have to deliver with excellence. So when you hear that, how does that play out with you mentally in terms of Malone?
Cy, I think you're the first person that has kind of put that triad together in that way to describe the kind of work. But you're spot on, and that is actually what we're doing here. So, as they say, no margin, no mission. And I jokingly say, just because we're a not-for-profit institution doesn't mean that we're for loss. You've got to make sure that you're able to balance the books, and so the business aspect is absolutely fundamental. The other two are completely critical because, in my mind, there is no reason for Malone to exist other than as an intentional Christian university. Ohio basically went through this spurt in the late 1800s that every small town felt like they had to found their own college. And so we have all of these little four-year liberal arts schools. Some of them have grown larger, but throughout the state of Ohio, we have too many colleges and universities for the demographics that we have in the state of Ohio. And they're all kind of competing, and they're all saying the same things. You know, we have small schools, smaller class sizes, more personal attention. The reason that Malone is distinctive in this is because we really do try to operationalize our motto, Christ's kingdom first in all things. And if we don't center on Christ, then there's really no reason for us to exist even. And so there's a number of ways that this manifests itself. So I talk about this, and then I talk about the excellence in education, which is critical as well. But so this is a holistic understanding of education. It's not transactional. It's not like I'm going to pay you X dollars and you're going to download X skill or knowledge to me. But whether the student and their family are thinking about it or not, we are thinking about shaping and developing an entire person. And that means several things. It means every single course has to integrate faith in an authentic and organic way. And that does not mean a prayer at the beginning of class and you've checked the box and you've integrated faith. What that means is the professor is asked to think deeply about what it means to be a Christian in the approach of this particular class, this course. So I'll use accounting, for example. Is there a Christian accounting? Like, are Christian accounting principles different than secular accounting principles? And we teach the same formulas, the same principles, but an accounting course at Malone is going to be different than one at Ohio State, because the professor is going to be asked to do a few things, one of which is to bring to the students, does the Bible have anything interesting to say about money? Turns out, actually, the Bible does have some very interesting things to say about money. How might that apply to the discipline of accounting? Also, calling. Why are you taking this course? Integrity. I don't want people to graduate from Malone great in accounting and go to work for a place like Enron. You want people who have integrity, have been trained in a particular kind of character and fashion. And I tell our faculty, full-time and part-time, that this is going to be different than any teaching experience that you have had, because at Malone, you not only have responsibility for the content of the courses, but you actually are taking on some spiritual responsibility for the lives of your students who are in front of you. Mm-hmm. And if you're not willing to take on some spiritual responsibility for them, to watch out for their souls, to be open to moments where the Holy Spirit might give an opportunity for encouragement or mentoring, then this is not the place for you to teach. And there are some people that they're not going to be comfortable teaching at a place where they literally are thinking, I have some spiritual responsibility for these young people that are sitting in front of me. Mm-hmm. And that's just in the classroom. And then we surround them. I sometimes ask pastors, how many hours a week do you have to influence the life of an 18 to 22-year-old in your congregation? And the most active church will tell me 2, 3, 4. And then you think about a residential Christian university who takes a holistic education seriously. In the classroom, in the dorms, in our co-curriculars, on the playing fields, hallway conversations. We've got them 24/7. And the ability that we have, by the grace of God, to speak into the life of that young person at a critical juncture, the church simply has no other institution like a Christian university to have the impact on young people. And so that's absolutely essential. And operationalizing that through the whole organization is a key part of my job. Mm-hmm. Making sure we have the right people in place, making sure that we're doing this with reflection and skill, making sure that we have a 360 holistic understanding of the education that occurs here. So the business side are critical anchoring in who we are in Christ as an organization. But then if you don't have an excellent product, you don't have a university. You cannot simply put a fish symbol on our diploma and call it a day. And you can't just, say we have chapel and call it a day. And so the outcomes, the quality outcomes measures, and I have asked every single program to demonstrate quality outcomes of their students. Every single program. There's not a one. And it's harder for some than it is for others. Some, in terms of the professions, have national tests that the graduates would need to take to demonstrate their skill. I'll give you one example that we're particularly proud of here at Malone. We have a very strong nursing program that trains nurses to be holistic nurses, caring for the souls as well as the bodies of their patients is a beautiful thing. But if they just did that and they weren't good nurses, no hospitals would hire our folks. But there is a nursing accreditation exam, licensure exam called the NCLEX. That's the acronym, the NCLEX exam that all Bachelor of Science in Nursing students across the entire country take at the end of their education. And that gives them licensure to the field. And the last 2 years, the full results are not in from the graduating class of 2025, but in 2023 and 2024, 100% of our BSN grads pass the NCLEX on the first try. So nice. That is a level of quality where I can say without hesitation, our nurses are well prepared to be value add to their medical organizations from day one. And the NCLEX demonstrates it, but we wouldn't need it because in some senses, because our nursing students are getting picked up and hired before they even finish their degree. And so the quality outcomes are in the placements, in the workforce, how well they have done following their time here at Malone and in their licensure exams. But it's not just nursing. Every single program is required at Malone to demonstrate quality outcomes measures so we can tell our families, you're not just getting a Christ-centered education, you're getting a Christ-centered quality education at Malone. And if we cannot do it well, we're not going to do it.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, and you have to deliver excellence, and it has to be perceived by the customer, right? Because they want excellence for their child, and specifically as it relates to my son or daughter. So demonstrating that is gold, and that's definitely that piece of the educational institutions. Hey, this is why you exist in the first place. But a lot to unpack there, and I love that point. And maybe that's a good transition too to the changing nature of the quality of education that you're even providing. Not that it's, or the type, I should say, and what it looks like. Because as you know, and I mentioned this in the outset, the workforce is changing. We're finally seeing the boomers kind of officially exit the workforce in large numbers, of most of them now 70s and 80s especially, and they're leaving a lot of these trade positions. And now what we're finding is, we're having more and more students at the K-12 level say, hey, I'm going to take that gap year, or I'm going to maybe look at something that's trade related or something of that, or I'm going to maybe reconsider a vocation that was traditionally maybe shut out of the university level, and just exploring some of these things for the very first time at 18 years old that they never did before, because the market was just saturated with people who were already in those jobs. And now all of a sudden they're open and they're good paying jobs, and they're saying, maybe I should look at that. So how is this whole changing workforce impacting, not only Malone, but just higher ed in general? What are you doing to maybe address some of these things to make sure that, people know, hey, there's a place for you here as well?
Right. It's an incredibly important point. Our workforce needs are changing, and expectations of families are changing, and higher ed has has to innovate, or it will be left behind. And I will tell you that higher ed in general is not a sector that deals with change well. I mean, we still wear medieval clothes at least twice a year for commencement and convocation. So we're still wearing clothes from 1,000 years or so ago. The change is not accepted very quickly here, but we have to. And a place like Malone that's on the smaller side can be like a little clipper ship, as opposed to some of the larger kind of cruise ships, in that we can adapt more readily to these needs. So I'll tell you a couple of ways that we're doing it that I believe are cutting edge, and other institutions of higher ed will follow. But it does require a paradigm shift. What I'm about to say does require a pretty significant paradigm shift in terms of how education is viewed in our culture overall. That's what I am actually kind of calling people to do. I will tell all of the K-12 folks that are listening to your podcast, and I know there are many, that I would encourage you in the Christian K-12 space to not neglect training. That's not been something that Christian schools have traditionally done, kind of have found a way to maybe offshore that. But some kind of a partnership involvement with as much as that you can do with your own folks and on site, I would strongly encourage you because this is going to be a workforce direction that our society is going to go, and especially, and not exclusively, but especially if you care about the development of young men. That I would encourage our K-12 listeners to think, what's our plan? What's our strategy for engaging career tech kinds of education at our school? So this is what we're doing at Malone. So traditionally, we have kind of divided young people in the high school period or before into two categories, like, okay, you're college material or you should go into the trades. What if that was a false dichotomy? Or we said, okay, you can go into trade training, but you can't do that and go to a Christian school. Well, what if that's a false dichotomy? Or this is another big one. Yeah, you can go into trade training or you can participate in collegiate athletics, but you can't do both. What if that's a false dichotomy? So we have created here, and we're just launching this fall with our first pilot program. That's a hybrid skilled trades program in welding. And the reason for welding is we had some very nationally prominent companies in our local area who were led by believers who had a vision for what would it be like if we actually trained welders in a Christian environment to be able to work in this workforce and be a light for Christ. What if we did that? Could we do that? And so we had some very prominent business partners in order to do this, and the workforce needs are significant. And today's skilled trades are not my grandfather's skilled trades. Right. I mean, the kind of critical thinking skills and business savvy that you need to be successful in today's skilled trades is because of the degree of the use of tech and automation. It is far beyond what it used to be, and that calls for a different approach to career tech education. And so we have actually created a program where a student is a business administration four-year major at Malone with a concentration in welding. We front load the welding training. It's just starting this fall, so they do mostly this welding. Then they have an off-ramp if they want to go immediately into the workforce. Doesn't take them any longer than a traditional trade school, or a seamless pathway to the completion of their business degree. But what they gain through this is they gain a real college experience, They gain NCAA athletic eligibility. They gain business acumen, a career mindset, not just a job mindset. They pull a young man into a residential Christian environment where he's not just kind of hanging out with his high school buddies still, but he's in a new world where his social horizons are expanded, greater opportunity. He's going to end up in welding, but that young man is likely someday not only going to be a shop floor manager, but he may actually be in the company leadership as a result of the hybrid combining of these two things together. So those are just one example of how we're trying to think innovatively in terms of this new workforce and its needs.
Yeah, and I think you said it well, because I think that's a key that people have to understand. It's a great program, by the way. I mean, people are going to be shocked when they hear about this, and when it gets rolled out, then I pray it's successful. But when we think, yes, trade and, we're going to do what the boomers did, you're exactly right. It's different today. Yes, we're categorically putting them there and saying, yeah, they're going to be electricians and plumbers and ag workers and things like that. But all of these jobs, because of like what you just said, because of the nature of the economy and the workforce and technology, they look completely different than they did when these people entered the workforce back in the 1950s, let's say, or 50s and 60s even, and I completely agree. I've got a constituent who's a good friend, and he's got a major agricultural business in Ohio, both livestock, and plants. He can tell you how much I know about some of these things. But in talking with him, I'm shocked at what he can do on his phone to run his farm. And so, he's got the latest apps from John Deere, and he can track every tractor that he owns and how much fuel it's at and where it's at and at that specific point in time, and how much life is left in that tractor and what kind of production he's getting out of it. Every tractor on the farm. And so, and he loves it, of course. And then he's got another app to track the commodities market and what the prices are of things that he's selling. Because like I said, he's a major player in this in Ohio's economy in a couple of different areas. And so, we weren't doing this obviously, 40, 50 years ago, but this is the new. And so there's opportunity there for these kids who come from our K-12s and who come from these Christian universities to do these things for the common good of humanity. I'm always talking about that too. This is the high calling for us believers as humans and God's greatest creation, to take care of each other in this way, and not to think less of the guy who owns a construction company and provides housing and apartments and things like that. This is glorifying to the Lord and absolutely essential. So if schools like Malone and schools like Mansfield Christian can come alongside these kids and families and say, you know what, this whole culture, this workforce has changed, and we want to be a part of making it better and doing anything we can, and not just saying, hey, we're for humanities majors, or we're for, some of those things that they might traditionally associate with us. Well, again, you've done great work, and I think that's an excellent program. And like I said from the outset, as we kind of think about wrapping things up here, you've really done well too, and I've appreciated that. Always accepting our invitations and saying, hey, let me speak into K-12, because I know you value it at this level. Yeah. And so I just thought, maybe what have you seen over the years, because you are a tenured professor and you've been at this a long time. I'm of course, and you're of course, paid to preach Christian education, but just as a fellow believer, what have you noticed through the years that just continues to drive your convictions that, boy, Christian education really is what's best for our children, what's needed for our country, and maybe even what you've seen with some of the students there at Malone, but what continues to make you sold out for what it is that you and I do?
Yeah, and of course I could tell you all kinds of stories about individual students, but I will tell you that right now the church and society as a whole needs a particular kind of person. This is a kind of person who's formed morally in a society where sexual ethics is going away considerably different from God's plan. Where there's issues of identity and confusion, so much confusion in our society on issues of marriage, sexuality, and identity, for us to be able to provide a flourishing context that says, listen, God's got a plan for your life. God has a blueprint for what human flourishing looks like. And we are going to surround you. And we're going to show you and help you and model for you what this blueprint for flourishing looks like. So this is not just simply, as I said, a transactional exchange. In Christian education, we are geared at producing a particular kind of person who is going to be able to flourish through life as a believer according to God's plan for their flourishing. And as we say at Malone, we're trying to do two things simultaneously. We're trying to prepare a student for a lifetime of human flourishing and for a job in June after graduation. And you can do both of those two things at the same time. But increasingly in education, I've noticed a trend towards transactional understandings of education. I pay you this, you give me this skill. That's fine, but that does not produce the kind of human beings that our churches need, that our society needs. That does not produce Christ-like men and young women who are going to be difference makers. And so that's, one student is a nursing major. During COVID, I asked her what she was doing. She's working for Cleveland Clinic. And I said, what did you do? She said, they assigned me to the ICU where I was with the COVID patients as they were dying because their family member could not be there with them. And I thought, oh my goodness, bless your heart. How can you do that? And she said, I can do that because I was trained at Malone to integrate faith as a part of my nursing. And so that young lady walked dozens of people into eternity and prayed them into eternity. And I thought, wow, you could have a totally different nurse in that context, calloused and monitoring signals, or you can have somebody who's been shaped or formed to be a believer, to understand that the world is a bigger place and this is not all there is, and to perform just an incredibly important function in that individual's life and in the life of that family. So that's what we're about in Christian education. And I know you are at also Cy at Mansfield. We're all in this together, and that's why I'm trying to work together with our private Christian evangelical high school partners as much as possible, because it takes a village, and together over multiple years, we will be able to develop those men and women that can glorify God and really truly put Christ's kingdom first.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I love your opening line there. I wrote it down. Society needs a particular kind of person. And I think we'd all agree with that. And that's exactly what we're aiming for at our school and at yours. Well, again, great conversation. So many routes we can take this. We'll come back sometime for part 2. But if they want to know more about Greg Miller, they want to know more about Malone and your work there, what should they do? How can they find out a little bit more?
So in general, I'd send you to malone.edu. You go to the opening page and you're going to see very clearly about who we are and where we're going. However, if you have any specific questions about any program that I said that you can't find an answer to through the website, you please feel free. Your listeners can reach out to president@malone.edu. Very simple, and I'll quarterback that to make sure that gets in the right place. President@malone.edu, and then malone.edu is our website. MALONE. So God bless, Cy, and thanks for the opportunity here.
No, thank you. Yep, and I do know from experience that he will get back in touch with you, and it won't be weeks and months, and he will stay in contact. So appreciate your connection. Well, let me make 2 quick chalkboard points for you to consider as the listener for remembering as we close today's show and just kind of wrap some things up. Chalkboard point number 1, Christian schools, again, are a unique hybrid, an educational institution, a ministry, and a business. Leaders must do more than just acknowledge this dynamic. They must work effectively in each area if they're going to succeed. Neglecting any one of these pieces will threaten your sustainability and potentially compromise your impact for the kingdom. And point number 2, if you're going to both survive and thrive in this changing culture and economy, you're going to have to do 2 things. First, you're going to have to deliver your mission with excellence. Recognize that parents expect mission delivery in the lives of their children. And second, stand boldly on your Christian identity, as we talked about. It's being a Christian that sets us apart, and we must not shy away from this. So as you grow, you can't lose the very thing that gave you this opportunity in the first place. So this is what makes your culture unique, and you have to decide in advance to protect it at all cost. Well, again, that's our lesson for today, and I hope that now you know more. And when you know more, you can do more. You can not only think differently, but you can act differently and make a change, live out those convictions, and say no more if you must. Again, this is Dr. Cy Smith with Clearly Christian, and I trust that today you know more about the business of education and the impact of the changing American workforce. If you like the show, you thought it's worth listening and checking out, again, subscribe. I'd certainly appreciate that. Because remember, the only way we're going to turn things around in our country is to increase the number of people who hold a biblical worldview and live that out every day, as we talked about in our show today. And the greatest hope we have to get there is Christian education. Again, I'm Dr. Cy Smith, and this is Clearly Christian. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Clearly Christian podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. Hear more episodes at clearlychristianeducation.com. If you'd like more information about Christian education in your neighborhood, or if you're interested in education opportunities at Mansfield Christian School, or if you agree with Dr. Smith and want to help him in his mission to influence and awaken Christian America, you can send Dr. Smith an email through the clearlychristianeducation.com website. Message him on the Clearly Christian LinkedIn or Facebook page, or call the Clearly Christian Connection line at 419-756-5651. This has been the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith on clearlychristianeducation.com, brought to you in conjunction with Mansfield Christian School, a Bryan Media production.